Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on our next LinkedIn Live. If you're joining us live, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are right now. And for those of you who are watching the recording, thank you. I hope you enjoy it. If you've got any questions, you can always reach out to myself or Duarte directly after watching the recording. So my name is Justina Brownbridge, and I've got an absolute pleasure to have with us today Duarte Garrido from Coca-Cola HBC. Hello, Duarte.
Hi, Justina. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I think perhaps what we could start with is a little story of how we met, because I think this just shows the power of social media, right?
This is true.
So I think you were one of our first viewers of our LinkedIn Live series that we started, I think, January early this year, and you were very much involved and engaged in the conversation. And that's how we met, right? That's how we've connected. That's how we started having a conversation. And we couldn't be happier that you decided to, this time, you take the stage and share the knowledge with our audience.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I'm an avid listener of the show. I'm an avid podcast listener overall, but I've been following your podcast for quite some time. So it's a bit of an honor to be invited as a guest.
Thank you. Thank you for agreeing to do that. And for those of you who are joining right now, hello, hi everyone, hi Ryan, hi David. As with the previous LinkedIn Lives, this is an interactive session. That's the beauty of LinkedIn Live. So if you've got any questions, if you've got any comments, if you just want to say hi, please do. It will be absolutely amazing to have some interaction as well from our audience. But we've prepared some questions as well, because the subject of today's LinkedIn Live is how brands can build trust on social media. But before we move on to the subject, Duarte, could you tell us just a bit about your role at Coca-Cola HBC and what's in your remit?
Of course, yeah. So I'm currently the head of social for Coca-Cola HBC. And most of your viewers must be scratching their heads as to what exactly is the HBC in front of Coca-Cola. And I can very briefly explain that Coca-Cola it works in what we call a network model. So actually the Coca-Cola company doesn't produce, bottle, or distribute the drinks. They have what they call strategic bottling partners. And one of them is Coca-Cola HBC, another is Coca-Cola Europe Pacifics, and so on and so forth. Coca-Cola HBC's remit is across most of Eastern Europe, some of Western Europe, some of Africa as well. And yeah, my role, as I started about nearly 6 months ago, so I'm still learning the ropes and getting my feet under the table, but it is to manage and draw strategy for their global social media channels and work with all of the Coca-Cola HBC markets and the employer branding team to empower them through social media as well.
Excellent. That's a lot of our audience. That's exactly what they are thinking about, or already doing, or rethinking how they could be doing things. So it would be brilliant also if they could learn from you some tips on how this is happening on your front. But the subject today is trust, right? And I know that you are very passionate about this subject as well. You've recently done a fantastic presentation on the subject on the Future of Marketing Technology conference. And I just really just would like to start with some stats that you also presented during the conference from Edelman Trust Barometer. And I think maybe even just before we go into the statistics, one sentence that really captures the attention right at the beginning of the latest report from Edelman is, "The world is at a trap of vicious cycle of distrust." That's how they start the report. And one of the first statistics mentioned is that nearly half of the respondents of the survey said they don't trust the government and media at the moment. What does that mean for brands?
It's a good question. I mean, it's true. Edelman says so, and I believe them. It's not just Edelman. There's a very good report on trust from Deloitte Digital as well, another from Accenture. So there's a lot of work being done on the issue of trust, or more specifically distrust, which is the sort of epidemic we're facing now when it comes to society. And I think it has a huge impact on brands, but there's also a lot of opportunity, because one of the curious things about the Edelman report is that while there is this epidemic of distrust around media and around governments and even cascading down to NGOs, actually companies are one of the most trusted entities. So there is this added responsibility at this point for companies to actually step in and compensate for the shortfallings of governments and the media, which is, it's actually, you can look at it glass half full or glass, but it's actually a great opportunity for brands to create meaningful connections with their followers on social media, for instance.
Great point. So if we go down that route, why do you think, or what have you read, what have you experienced yourself as well, there's actually more trust in the businesses than the government and the media?
Well, I mean, you can tell from social media that people expect something more than just product pushing, right? You can see that there is, especially in these newer generations, there's a big pushback when companies try and sell products on social, and when they try to target people with ads, which they are slightly now getting, it's not as impactful as it once was, advertising. I read a really funny statistic the other day from LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, which said that you're more likely to be trained as a Navy SEAL than to click on a banner ad. And that just tells you the impact of paid promotion when it comes to social media, right? So people actually expect a meaningful connection. They expect to be informed. They expect to be entertained, and that is a great opportunity for brands who are already in that space to, build relationships. And relationships, trust is at the foundation of human relationships, and it's not different when it comes to brands and customers either, or employees, or stakeholders for that matter.
Yes, and you're talking about social media, right? So linking that activity of being able to engage with your audience, you get the perfect opportunity to do that using the social media channels, because it's not just one-way communication, right? It's a two-way communication. You can hear the feedback, you can start the conversation, I think you've given so many examples of how your company, your social media department really is the place where people can from all over the parts of the business can gain some sort of information from, right? And it should be at the table. So let's maybe talk about that. That was your point at the conference, that social media should have a place at the table.
Yeah, I think if
elaborate on that.
Of course, yeah, I'd be happy to. I think that social media, there was this, a year or so ago, there was this vibe that social media was going to enter a strictly pay-to-play arena, right? And that organic was dead, mostly driven by, of course, Facebook, in which, yes, organic is, in fact, pretty much dead. But there are then the emergence of other platforms like LinkedIn and like TikTok, in which organic is very much alive and breathing, sort of laid that argument to rest. Social media is not just pay to play. Social media, like you said, is a place of dialogue and a place to build organic communities in. So I think when you're devising a social media strategy, you almost have to have those two mindsets, the left and right side of your brain working at the same time, which is, in one hand, there is the very big opportunity for social e-commerce that's just around the corner, and you shouldn't ignore that. And at the same time, there is some advantage depending on what kind of company, if you're a B2C or if you're a B2B, in what industry you're operating on. But there is some opportunity in paid targeting on social media, specifically now on LinkedIn, where you can target as specifically as not just someone's job title, but actually a specific person. So that's, for B2B, that's incredibly powerful. But at the same time, you have to build that organic framework, which is going to be your always on content, which is going to be your community building. And that is the side of your social media strategy that builds your reputation, that builds your brand, right? And that builds your connection with your customers, your connection with your employees, your connection with your stakeholders, with your investors, and that's increasingly important. But if you want to really take advantage of that, and that's what I mean by you need to let social media have a seat at the table, is you have to rethink how social media sits and where social media sits in your organization. Traditionally, social media comes from marketing, right? So it's set within the marketing department, and it was seen as an amplification or distribution tool for larger pieces of content that's set within your website or that were built by lead generation. But now it's actually something that should be used by everyone in the company, because now you have HR that needs social media because that's where they build employer branding, right? Employee advocacy. And that's such a fundamental part of your culture. And it is so essential to your brand's relevance going forward, right? To be able to not just attract the right talent, but retain the great talent you already have. You need to build a community with your employees and you need to build that relationship of trust. So HR, which was traditionally called HR and is now most often called people in culture, or they have realized that social media, that they need to be there as well, and they need to use that as a tool as well. So now social media is not just marketing, it's marketing and HR. And then procurement think, okay, we can actually use social media to do some market research, and then the sales team says, wait a minute, our job is no longer just to close a sale. Our job is to work closely with the marketing team to try and identify not just how we chase leads, but how we create leads, right? So how we create demand for our product. So where best to do that, but through social media. So suddenly, and then you have your C-suite thinking, okay, we need to, culture is built, well, they say that culture is built from the ground up, but actually there needs to be a very clear and very strong vision from senior management to be able to protect a company's brand, right? So senior leadership realizes that actually executive comms is no longer just doing earned communications with Bloomberg or with Reuters during Davos. No, senior leaders need to be constantly present on LinkedIn, speaking to their stakeholders, because what they've realized, and rightly so, is that everyone is on social media, all of their stakeholders. So suddenly, social media is a consultancy for the whole company, right? So it's essentially its own department. And that's what I mean by you need to rethink where social media sits within your company and how you utilize it, and give it a seat at the table, because you will need them for insights, you will need them for community building, you will need them for brand building, and you will need them for for marketing as well, as always, and to close sales.
Excellent. That's such a so much wider picture, right? That of a role that the social media could be playing, or in fact, that the social media is the place for all of the different parts of the business to connect in one way or another, depending with what sort of audience they are connecting with. But it sounds like a big job, okay, to have it all connected. So my question to you would be, where do you start? What would be the first step that you would recommend to people who would be willing to elevate the position of the social media teams?
Well, I guess first off, you have to get buy-in from senior management, right? And that's essential. It's very important that you're part of a company whose senior leadership understands the value of social media. It doesn't see it as the kids around the corner, right? Or the kids in the corner office. They need to see social media as the most important communications tool at their disposal, the most important brand building tool at their disposal. And I think they need to incorporate it in all their comm strategies. And that's actually something that very few companies and very few agencies do currently. VaynerMedia was one of the first to actually come in with integrated marketing campaigns that had social media just built into them. It wasn't, getting a Super Bowl ad and then splicing it into 4 or 5 teasers and publishing them on social. No, when you launch a campaign, you launch it together, and social media is part of it. And that's really important. So you have to get that buy-in from senior leadership. Great if you already have it, if you're part of a company that sees that and sees the value in what you do. But I would say the first step is to align whatever objectives you set yourself as a social media manager, as a head of social or social media leader, whatever you want to call yourself. You need to align your objectives with tangible key objectives for the company, right? Because you need to deliver on something else than just vanity metrics. Because for a long time, marketing was sort of looked down on from top management because it was seen as a cost center, essentially, right? Marketing in general was, it was something that
Still
companies
is.
spent money.
It
It still is. Most companies still see it like that. But there's been a shift in the last few years where actually most reasonable companies have realized that marketing is essential for a whole load of reasons. One of them, it is essential for product development, because marketing is where you actually listen to your customers, like I was saying, you can do through social media. It's essential for brand reputation. It's essential for purpose building, for culture building, to attract talent. So marketing in itself has been elevated. And that's why you see now so many CMOs rising to the level of CEOs, because suddenly marketing is no longer something set aside from the bottom line. No, they've realized that marketing and even the 3 Ps, the people, planet, and profit, they're all part of the same bottom line. Companies need to look at ESG as something essential to their growth and essential to their relevance in the future, and marketing plays a huge part in that. And I think now we need to see the same sort of attitude from senior leadership towards social media as well. It needs to stop being seen as something that we don't really understand, but some kids are on it, so apparently we get loads of clicks, loads of views, loads of reach, loads of engagement. So yeah, let's just produce some content and put it on there, or just hire an agency that does that for us and write them a blank check and have little to no oversight of what they do or what they deliver. So there needs to be a mind shift. And I think it's happening, but I think it'll take a little bit of push from most social media managers at this point, depending on what kind of company they're in, to really prove the value of social media. And step one is align your objectives with tangible business objectives. Deliver on something that senior management can say, okay, we see the value in this. This we can turn into actual, profit, or this we can turn into, even if it's things like Net Promoter Score, these are tangible things that you can say, this builds trust, okay? Mm-hmm. People will trust us more if we continue like we've been doing on this specific campaign on social. This increases our Net Promoter Score. If it increases our Net Promoter Score, if it increases our brand equity, then they know at this point, they already know that will drive growth for the company, right? And then once you have that foundation, I would say step number 2 is, the funny thing about social media is it is such a powerful tool that companies tend to go one way or the other. They're either incredibly protective of their social media content and their community engagement and their social media comms, and they don't give any freedom for community managers to act reactively, to things that happen online, or to be spontaneous or to be creative. And they build this big playbook and response book and they drop it in community managers' laps and say, if people talk to us on Facebook, these are your answers. You have to type them in word by word, and then they do the same with their content producers and their social media managers and say, if you're doing proactive content on social media, you have to follow these guidelines and you have to follow this incredibly bureaucratic process of approval. You have to go through legal, you have to go through, exec comms, you have to go through sustainability and external relations, whatever. You need to cut all that red tape if you want to keep some authenticity, some humanity, some empathy, right, as a brand. And it's only through that that you actually build relationships and that you stop sounding like a corporate giant or a brand, a faceless brand, or even worse, an automated bot. And you start sounding like people behind your brand. And that's when you start building that relationship, right? So they're either highly protective or they let everyone roam free and there is no oversight. And some very cool, edgy brands do that and very successfully. A few come to mind in the UK, like Innocent, for instance, where you can see that each, and I know because I know some of them, that each social media manager doesn't really report or doesn't get any of his or her content subbed before it's published. They have the freedom, the creative freedom to be themselves. And they hire people who are already aligned with the company's purpose, with the company's tone of voice. So the risk is slightly mitigated that way because the people behind the brand share the same values that the brand has. And that's really important. But there's always that risk that something will go wrong, right? There's always that risk that someone will send the wrong tweet or have, or not fail to read the room properly and say the wrong thing in the wrong time, or even have a culture clash and not really understand what happens beyond its own sort of country or culture. So you need to build a structure, you need to build an infrastructure as a head of social that allows your team to be creative and to be spontaneous and to be reactive, to be human, right? But at the same time, you protect your brand reputation, right? Because your brand's reputation is everything. And it's what ultimately will decide whether or not you will be relevant in the future. So there are a couple of ways to do that, of course. I have mine. And the way I do things is after aligning those objectives, I write a one-page document that's a sort of, and it's something I spoke about in the talk that you listened as well, which is a very sort of almost philosophical document, a bit like the US Constitutional, just stating purpose, stating values, and I call it a social media statement of purpose. And it just states who you want to be as a brand on social, who you don't want to be as a brand on social, why you're there. It's not a strategic document, it's a values-based approach, right? And that should be, it shouldn't restrict your social media managers or your community managers. It should be their North Star, right?
Mm-hmm.
As much as purpose is a North Star for product developers and for engineers and for project managers, right? A social media statement of purpose is the North Star for social media managers and for community managers. It helps them to understand what the brand is about, and it lets them sense check whatever they put out as your brand in a very powerful media with a huge reach, sense check as to whether that fits who your brand is on social or it doesn't. So I really treasure that document. And it's unrestrictive enough so that they will still be creative, they will still be spontaneous, they will still in a way be themselves.
I find it fascinating. I think that part, just such a specific practical tip in terms of how to sound authentic on social media, have some sort of guidelines, but not too much restriction, and build a structure for your presence on social media that anyone could follow, or at least anyone, you've got new people joining, people moving between departments, people going online as well as employees, they could follow, and they know, I think you said it also in the conference, if it doesn't fit in those values, if you look at that document or whatever the shape or form of that guidance is, and it doesn't fit in, then you scrap it, then you rethink how it is that you want to be positioned on the media.
Definitely, definitely. You need to, and that's exactly it. It serves as a sort of a smell test. It's either it fits or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you bin it, you go back to the drawing board, you write another post, you create another video, you just rethink the way you're representing your brand out there. And that is a bit of a safety net, which has proved very useful in the past. And I think it'll prove useful for social media managers in the future as well.
Fantastic. Do you have a template for that? Would you be willing to share that with our audience?
I mean, I don't, to be perfectly honest. It varies from company to company. As I said, it's very much, I use the US Constitution as a source of inspiration because it's very much values driven, and we will be this, we will be this, we will not be that, we will not be that. But also there's no template for it, because actually it needs to tie in with whatever company values and whatever company mission and purpose you're sitting on, because that's actually the foundation for everything, right? Mm-hmm. We know now that a company's mission and purpose and its values should be the foundation for everything the company does, from the kind of product they sell, to how they market it, to how they hire, to their culture, to how they communicate, to how they choose their business partners. So the social media statement of purpose needs to align with the company's statement of purpose, which is something beyond the social media manager's remit, but it is something that I would advise strongly. If you're joining a company, join it for the right reasons. I know that we're going through a tough time society-wise right now, and that salary and compensation is growing in importance, and it will, I'm afraid, probably grow even further as the cost of living crisis squeezes us all. But it is also always important to choose a place where you're going to work for its culture and for its purpose and its values. So, and I know that, I mean, I don't really need to say this, because if we look at the statistics, if we look at the coming generations, if we look at Gen Z, they will choose a place to work based on their beliefs and values. So it's more the companies that need to adapt than the employees or the customers.
Moreover, taking it even a step further, the recent Randstad Work Monitor report showed that Gen Z and millennials will actually leave. More than half said, or close to half said, that they will actually leave the company, even not having another job offer, if they're not happy. Okay, yeah. And they were listing what does it mean not being happy, and one of the things was not being aligned on the values, or not delivering on the promised values that the company said they had when they were hiring people.
And that's very interesting, because I feel like there's a bit of a misconception across marketing in general at the moment. And this is something that I've been working on for a while now, and reading and studying, which is, I mean, purpose is a bit of a given right now, right? Any big company right now has realized at this point the need for purpose and the importance that purpose and mission play on company growth and remaining relevant in the future. But what we see if we search for brands and their purpose is that some brands don't build purpose through values. Some brands, actually, I would say probably most brands, continue to see purpose as a utilitarian concept. And what I mean by that is, when you look, for instance, at the banking sector, I was looking at HSBC, and it's an interesting case. HSBC, their purpose, if you look at it, if you look it up, is to create a world of opportunities, or something along those lines. There's no human value on that purpose, right? Creating a world of opportunity is being useful, right? It's a utilitarian concept as a purpose. And while that is great, and you look at Google and it's the same, right? Their purpose is being helpful. Again, there's no human value attached to that. And I think that while that has proven and will continue to prove very useful when it comes to building company culture and when it comes to driving the right product and driving engineers and people towards the same North Star. Because, if Google engineers are aligned that whatever they're building needs to be helpful to the consumer, and they need to have the consumer at the core, which is what Google has been doing for years, then most likely the product will be useful for consumers. It will be helpful. And that will create a culture of helpfulness, and that'll be great internally, right? And the same for HSBC, creating a world of opportunities. That's great. That's great to drive to drive purpose internally. But what does that mean for the average consumer? What does that mean for the Gen Z who will, faced with choosing whether to open an account at HSBC or open an account with Revolut, for instance, with a smaller fintech, player in the area? They will look at it and they will see, okay, which of these companies aligns with my values? Because if you look at Edelman's report and if you look at Deloitte's report, they all mention values as important. Not so much purpose, but values when it comes to driving consumer habits, right? So they will look at these and they will say, okay, so what does Revolut stand for? And Revolut will stand for things like togetherness, and ambition. And they'll be like, okay, these are values that I myself as a human being share with this company. So this company, this brand, this logo, this credit card fits my wallet, right? This credit card fits my identity, my ego. And that's how a consumer chooses, right? And you look at a smaller player, for instance, in the same field, like Standard Chartered, and they nailed it so well because their purpose is here for good, which I found incredible for two reasons. One of them because of the play on it, right? Here for good says stability. They're here to stay, right? But also says they are here for good. Good as in the human value, right? And what bigger human value can there be? What bigger North Star can there be than striving to do good? And that's something that I feel like Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming after them probably will find key to choose not just the products they buy or the services they purchase, but also the companies they work for and ultimately the companies they invest in. So I think that there's this big misconception. Yes, purpose is great, but if you want to build trust, you need to align on values.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating subject, Duarte, and our audience agreeing with that. There you go. We've got, for some reason, we can't see the name, but we can see someone saying, agree with Duarte. 100% agree, Duarte. Again, leaders can't underestimate the importance of social media. It's not just a toy. I'm just catching up with all of the comments because I was so much focusing on what you were saying. Another person said, authenticity is key to communication, especially P2P, educating, informing, and inspiring customers to build trust. Companies must be supportive and give guidance, though not controlling. Okay, what else we've got in here? A great guest this week, sharing important and inspiring content. Fantastic. And yes, for some reason, sometimes we can't see the names of the people on the live LinkedIn, but hopefully we'll see it later. We can see that David is with us as well. Cool. Thank you. Duarte, clearly, this is such a fascinating subject. And perhaps that just makes me think, there's so many thoughts going on that because the social media teams are so much in front of the prospects, the clients, the employees, the everybody else involved in the communities, etc. they drive these conversations, and they see as well what's being discussed, how the world is changing as well, right? You're talking about the new generations, just about Gen Z. I think is just about joining, or is already joining, the workplace. I read as well that about, again, Gen Z. I'm really interested in that as well. That 18 to 24, we actually did a little report on how different age groups perceive the need for the guidance on social media. I've actually created a whole study on this subject, and actually Gen Zs actually don't read the social media guidelines. Most of them don't. That's just a boring document to go through, another kind of bureaucracy, or however, red tape, however you want to call it, that they have to go through in order to go online. For them, it's absolutely natural to go online, and for them, according to the report that we published as well, it's absolutely natural as well, or let's say some percentage of the people from that generation, to say something negative about their employer. Okay, so we've actually seen, if I remember correctly, a quarter of Gen Z said that they would say something negative about the employer, and I wonder if it's also to do with the fact that you want to have this openness of the conversation. The Gen Z and younger generations are willing to take part in the conversation, are willing to be open and describing what they think and what they feel and be heard. What does that mean for the brands, and what does that mean for companies wanting to involve people in
I
being
think
more
that,
online?
yeah, I mean, it shows a shift in the power dynamic, essentially, doesn't it? It shows that employers no longer hold the golden key. It's what is it they say? The talent war is over and talent won, right? So at this point, this generation isn't fearful of losing their jobs anymore, and that's a great thing. It's a good thing. I hope it doesn't change, and that's why they're willing to call out companies. They're willing to call out what they feel is hypocritical. They're willing to call out words, not actions. So I think that what this means for companies is that they need to, yes, set their values, yes, set their purpose, but then they need to walk the walk, right? They need to act on them. They need to show that with every action, with every product that they design, with every comms that they put out, with every business decision, every M&A, they need to align that with the core company purpose. And it's great because actually it ties the company together, right? It's not that the companies should be fearful of being called out. They should see this as an opportunity to be able to create a relationship with people using social media, for instance, or other channels, but they can create a relationship and they can say, listen, we've set ourselves these values, we've set ourselves this North Star, and we will try and do everything and stick by it on everything we do. And if sometimes we fail, which everyone does, and all
It's human.
companies do, it's human, right? You're exactly right. Then they will be called out, but when they called out, they have this incredible opportunity to start a conversation. They have this incredible opportunity to say, mea culpa, you're right, person X on Twitter, right? You're absolutely right on what you're saying. This is what we've done wrong. This is what we've learned from it. This is why we did it, and this is what we'll do different in the future. And just by having that open channel of communication with your community, then if you're really truly open, and if you're really truly open to admitting your failures and admitting your shortcomings, then there is no failing, right? There is just conversation. There's just dialogue and understanding and trust. Trust isn't completely broken ever. You can rebuild it, because throughout your tenure in any company, you will see trust being built and broken several times. because that's just the natural process of trust, right? Sometimes it grows, and sometimes you do something that will break that relationship of trust with one or more of your key stakeholders. And that what you need to do then is you need to work on rebuilding it. And what I advocate for is social media is the perfect place to do that, because it's, the world and the corporate world finally has a real time two-way conversation with every single one of its customers, with every single one of its employees, with every single one of its investors. Like that is such a powerful tool, and is such a great opportunity for society in general. We just need to embrace it, really, and create the capabilities internally as a company, and have the manpower, and have the processes and the workflow, and quite frankly, the investment that it takes to be able to respond to these people, to be able to create relationships, to mend relationships when needs be. You can't do that with one social media manager, right? A company, you just can't, sitting in the corner within the marketing department. You can't do it like that. You need to realize that social media needs to be quite a big operation, because they're the holders of your company's reputation externally.
It sounds to me, I just wrote it down, like a soul-searching activity.
Yeah, it is in a way. Absolutely.
If you are, if that's what you are committed to do, if that's the longer-term plan, is to elevate your presence on social media through your employees, especially through your employees, then it sounds to me that the whole soul-searching activity has to happen across the whole company level, in terms of just protecting integrity as well. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean to be us, right? Like, it almost feels like there has to be this activity on what does it mean to be us? What is it that we actually believe in and are willing to stand by, not just on paper, but in real situation? You said words, not action.
Yeah, well, it's the other way around, actually. Action, not words.
Action,
But
oh my
yes.
gosh, sorry. Action, not words. Absolutely. Action, not words. Words,
But,
we've had words, we had mission statements, yes? We had visions written in lovely presentations. But what does it mean in terms of the real behaviors?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, words are important. I mean, we're communicators, right? We live on words. And it's important not just to have them written down, because that will set the course of your actions. It will serve as a guiding compass. But also, it's imperative to communicate them. It's imperative to communicate your values, because if people don't know what you're about, then they can't relate with you, right? And if they can't relate with you, they can't be part of your brand. They can't be part of your community. So your brand starts with time losing relevance. And I give this example often because it's one that I've studied recently, which is Google, which is it's such a big, sort of colossal company with such great products. I mean, pretty much it's been a product-driven company since its inception, right? But what they've failed to do is to build a brand narrative, to build a brand that's strong, and that they'll cease to be seen as search, which is one of their products, and they'll start being seen by the multitude of products that Google holds. And to do that, they need to focus on brand, and to do that, they need to focus on values, right? Because ultimately, being helpful is not what's going to make someone from Gen Z choose to buy Google Pixel instead of Apple iPhone, right? But if Google's, if they change if you look at their 2004 IPO, which is a great piece of work, it's really inspiring for 2004. One of their company statements is "Don't be evil," which was, revolutionary for a company at the time and incredible, and that set Google's path for a long time. But right now, not being evil is no longer enough, I'm afraid. You have to go the extra mile. You have to be good, right? You have to do good. You have to work towards improving society. and the planet and animals and people, and and so if Google swapped the helpfulness of their purpose towards good, then when a Gen Z consumer would look at an Apple, which is known for wall garden, right? Closed circuit, keeping us all slaves to their circle of products. So when they look at an Apple iPhone, which is, great, and it's a fashion statement, if nothing else, and they look at a Google Pixel, they will think, my values as a person, they fit within this phone, not this one.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and this is what will make Google remain relevant in the future. I think that they need to, well, and not just Google, but most major companies and most major tech companies, to be honest, they need to see themselves from the outside. They are very much involved they are so involved in what they've set as their company culture, right? In Google's case, their own lingo, their own color palette, they have a great company culture. But because they've built this sort of closed ecosystem, this sort of Google bubble, sometimes I feel like they're slightly oblivious to how the world sees them, to how the world perceives them. And it's a pretty dangerous blind spot. And, looking at competitors in the field of search, like Nevo, which is a small company backed by Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, that's just come in, that's going to offer search without the ads, for instance, looking at how their industry is changing and new players are coming in. I would say they are already losing relevance and they just don't know it yet. My suggestion is, if you want to recapture it, focus on a values-based approach. And that piece of advice goes to every big company out there. Your brand is not what you say it is, it's what your customers say it is. So step outside, listen to what's happening around you, and realize, have a little bit of self-awareness. We talk a lot about self-awareness on LinkedIn, in those cringe conversations that no one likes, but everyone's involved in. Self-awareness as being this incredible personality trait that we should all have, and we should. But companies need to have it too. Companies need to have a big dose of self-awareness if they want to remain relevant.
Incredible tips, Duarte. So much to reflect. I'm sure our audience agrees as well. I don't know if we've got any questions from the audience that you would like to pass to Duarte. I'm just looking through. I can see a question here from David. You have an interesting challenge, I guess, when you work so closely with one of the world's most trusted brands, Coca-Cola, and have a responsibility to protect that. Can you discuss a little?
Well, actually, yes, we are part of the Coca-Cola ecosystem and the Coca-Cola family as such. And I am one of the many holders of brand reputation around the company. Well, I guess it is a big responsibility, but it's also quite a big privilege, to be able to protect the reputation of such a brand that's so nostalgic to so many people, that means so much to so many people, that's in everyone's sort of subconscious almost always, and that it ties to really warm feelings from the past. At least for me, that's what Coca-Cola brings is images of childhood and happier, sunnier days outside. So it's a really big privilege overall. And again, we do have a very, an already set brand purpose, an already set list of brand values. And like in every other company that I've worked with, I did draw that social media statement of purpose to begin with, to set all our social media communications going forward, so that I don't fail as a communicator. And by failing as a communicator, I put the reputation of the brand in danger, because I wouldn't want to do that.
Sure. Absolutely. Like you say, big responsibility, but big privilege as well.
Of course.
So finally, we're heading towards the end of our session. Are there any final tips or thoughts that you have that you would like to share with our audience on the subject of building the brand trust on social media?
That's a good question. I would say, yeah, let your creatives be creative. Protect your creatives. I think that's really important. I think that's something that we always, that people have said since, the age of Madison Avenue marketers and ad men. Protect your creatives. But I feel like not a lot of marketing departments actually do that, and you need to do it. You need to really let your brand grow through creativity, because it is a really, really powerful vehicle of trust building. I feel like if you strangle that, then you don't have a big chance of building communities and of building relationships, because people are driven by creativity and imagination. So I would say protect that.
Incredible tip. Thank you very much, Duarte. It's been absolute pleasure to have you here on the show. So many things to reflect on based on what you shared in here today. What's the best way of connecting with you online if people would like to continue this conversation?
LinkedIn, of course. Yeah. LinkedIn is the
LinkedIn.
best way to reach out to me. Yeah, and please do always. And my LinkedIn door is always open, unless you're cold DMing me to sell a product, in which case no, because that's not how you do things. And Twitter as well. I'm at PG on social, so please reach out to me on Twitter as well, and I'm there. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Duarte, and thank you everyone who have joined us on this session today.
Thanks all.